Greetings, music nerds, and welcome to Season 7 of the Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast. I'm your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hen House Studio here in East Nashville, Tennessee. I'm so glad you've chosen to join me once again as we take some deep dives with a cast of wonderful musicians, producers, and engineers that I've managed to track down and speak to about making music, records, and just doing what they do in their lives in music. Don't forget there's a link to a playlist on Spotify and Apple Music with links to many of the songs we discuss on today's episode. You'll find links to those playlists in the show notes below or at our website. Meanwhile, the show continues to be largely listener-supported. Your help in keeping the show going is always appreciated, and you can do it with a one-time donation or a Patreon subscription, which is a monthly payment of your choice. And when you sign up for Patreon, you get an ad-free version of the show to listen to, as well as getting entered to win a cunning prize pack from our sponsors at the end of the season. Or if you're tight for dough and you still want to help out, you can subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just by spreading the word, sharing the show, following us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and telling all your pals about it. You can get links to all this stuff at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Meanwhile, a huge thanks to the sponsors this season. Please check them out and let them know I sent you. They are Union Tube and Transistor, Spectra 1964, the Deering Banjo Company, Mule Resophonic Guitars, and the Hen House Hang. All right, thanks so much to you for tuning in, and let's get down to it. Howdy, music nerds, and welcome back to the show. This is episode number 154, and my guest this week is an incredible singer and songwriter. He was a member of the Civil Wars and now does all kinds of cool and interesting stuff, Mr. John Paul White. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I really appreciate you joining me this week and every week, as always. Just an update on the end of season giveaway. Our good pals at Spectra 1964 have jumped into the fray with their insanely cool BB-DI. It's a DI. It sounds amazing. I use one all the time here, and there's one up for grabs. And that's going to be given away at the end of the season, which is coming up in a couple of months in the new year. I think we're running into late January now with the episodes. Then we're going to take a little break. But at the end of the season, which is in late January, anyone who is a Patreon subscriber to the show, which is always much appreciated and helps us keep the proverbial lights on, so to speak, anyone that is a Patreon subscriber will be entered automatically into the final draw, which includes some wicked Union Tube and Transistor pedals, guitar pedals, and these BB-DIs from Spectra 1964. So get on it. All you got to do is be a Patreon subscriber. It's as little as a couple bucks a month and really helps us out. And that's all you got to do. So thanks to our sponsors for taking part in that, and thanks to you for helping out the show. And I'd just like to shout out to a couple of new Patreon members this week who were generous enough to help support the show. Many thanks to Steve Goldberger, and check this name out, Simplifier. Is that your name, Simplifier? I love it. That's cool. That's the name that shows up on Patreon, Simplifier. Thank you. All right, on to this week's show. John Paul White lives in Florence, Alabama, and is known by many for all his amazing work with the Grammy-winning band The Civil Wars. But John Paul has also worked as a professional songwriter. He runs a studio and a label called Single Lock Records and operates out of Florence. And Florence is part of the three cities known as the Shoals, or as us music nerds know it as, Muscle Shoals. And John Paul is a wicked dude. And you'll hear us talking about how I'm an idiot for never having visited Muscle Shoals in the 10 years that I've lived in Nashville. Muscle Shoals is less than 2 hours drive from here. And sure enough, since we've done this episode a while back, I've actually taken him up on the offer to visit the Shoals. And he did indeed take me through the Fame studio and the Muscle Shoals Sound studio and his own studio in Florence. And man, it's so incredible. I should just mention that both those studios are amazing places to visit, and the staff at both is really knowledgeable about the history and super accommodating and friendly, and it was so fun to go through those two buildings and just steeped in wicked history. I don't know about you guys, but my relationship with Muscle Shoals goes back to when I was an aspiring young guitar player in my teens listening to music, and I wound up with the Duane Allman Anthology, which to me was the gateway into all that music. Have you ever heard that compilation? I don't know, it's not the same anymore because, with Spotify and whatever, all that stuff's just sitting there. But in my day, pre-Spotify, man, I got my mitts on the Duane Allman anthology, particularly volume 1, but also there was a volume 2 of it. And it's like a compilation of all the sessions at Muscle Shoals Sound and Fame that Duane Allman was a part of. But that includes tracks by like Wilson Pickett and Clarence Carter, some of the early Allman stuff when they were called the Hourglass. There's Aretha Franklin, King Curtis. Man, there's a track of King Curtis that's called Games People Play that has just, I think, the greatest slide guitar sound on it. It's not like a big solo or anything, but it's just wicked anyway. John Hammond, Johnny Jenkins, Boz Scaggs, and man, it's just so good. And then he's sitting there like fishing on the front album cover, and I always found that picture really fascinating too. Anyway, it's one of the coolest compilations. It's what got me into all that music in the first place. And from there, it was just like a gateway into like a whole world of amazing music. And that was my weird Canadian kid introduction to Muscle Shoals and a lot of artists that recorded there and just that music in general and getting into it. And that was my way in. Anyway, John Paul grew up in a small town in Tennessee, really close to Florence. And during his college days in the area, started playing gigs in bands and a solo artist on his own. And he eventually discovered that he loved songwriting, especially as a vehicle for him to be able to sing and perform. And that led to him recording an album with his band and eventually a solo album called The Long Goodbye, which is wicked. But it was at a songwriting workshop that he was paired up. That was in Nashville, I think. He was paired up with the already successful Joy Williams. And they hit it off immediately and started working on music that became the Civil Wars. And in their relatively short lifespan, they made a couple of killer records. There's some EPs, there's some live recordings, some video stuff. But basically, there's 2 records, both with producer Charlie Peacock. They landed some songs on shows like Grey's Anatomy, which really helped their rise to uber stardom. And when their debut album came out in 2011 called Barton Hollow, it was a huge success and won a Grammy that year, or the next year, I guess, after it came out. They won a number of Grammys, actually. And they worked with some other producers a few times, like T-Bone and Rick Rubin, which we'll get into today as well. It was a lot of fun to hear about some of that stuff. The Civil Wars came to a somewhat crashing halt around 2013, and John Paul has restarted his solo career since then, his label, and now he's got his studio going as well. His albums Beulah and then the most recent one, which is from a couple years ago now, called The Hurting Kind, are both stellar records to check out. They're very different sonically and both really deep and interesting. So it was great to speak to John Paul about all of these projects, his creative process, how he songwrites and what some of his influences are, and what he's up to these days. So you can follow him for any shows that are coming up and news on albums he's making or producing for other people over at johnpaulwhite.com. And now, enjoy my conversation with John Paul White. Thanks for listening. Thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate you.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Thank you for being flexible with
sure.
a ridiculous schedule.
I also have a pretty wiggy schedule, and I'm very used to just making it work however it needs to work.
Yeah. I don't know if I would know how to act if I had any kind of structure to my life. And we may talk about this, but I've been teaching a couple of classes over at UNA, University of North Alabama. And it's weird having to be somewhere at a certain time every week. I haven't done that for 25 years. Yeah.
Whoa.
So it's odd.
Yeah, I have a bunch of things I wanted to ask you about, but that sounds pretty intriguing. So are you teaching like a songwriting thing, or what's your
I am.
Wow.
I'm doing 2 courses per semester. So this spring is songwriting and artist development. And then in the fall. Then in the spring is advanced songwriting and production. Although I am going to teach a publishing class this year too. So, but we smash it all into Monday and Wednesday. Okay. And then I can tour all weekend.
Yeah.
They're incredibly understanding about the way my life works, and they want me to continue touring. They want me to continue making records. So if I need to leave for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, they're perfectly fine with it, because now with online options, I can always get my class work. And I'm very lucky The campus is like blocks away.
Oh man.
Man, the UNA tennis courts are basically in my backyard. But I've worked really hard for a really long time, and this feels a little like a culmination of all that. So part of me feels guilty because it's a pretty good gig, but also not to sound arrogant, but I feel like I've earned it at least now, and we'll see where it goes from here. I'm filling it out.
So was this something you were looking to get into, or did it just kind of come along, or did you know somebody at the university, or tell me about the process of that?
I graduated from that program, so I've been in touch with with the university ever since, and I usually would go and talk to classes when I wasn't on tour because some of the faculty are really close to. But I had thought, in the back of my mind, someday I think that'd be fun, but didn't think I was there. And COVID came along, and we were about a year into it, and no end in sight at the time. The Dr. Garferic that runs the program reached out to me, said, "I know you don't want to do this, but the provost is poking me, saying, you think you'd ever?" He said, "Well, all I can do is ask him." And I said, "Well, you picked a perfect time to ask me that, because I was sitting here with a whole lot of time on my hands, and like, what now? What if I can't tour anymore? What am I going to do? What's the?" And I toured so much, so heavy for so long that looked good too. A little stability, a little something to force me off the road for a little while. So I tentatively, I tiptoed in. I said, well, I'll do one class and we'll see how it goes. And at the beginning, it was a lot of COVID precautions, so it just felt very detached. Everybody's in a mask and they're all sitting 6 feet apart. And this is my first classroom.
So
I don't know what I'm doing.
You were in person then when you started?
By the time I started, we were in person. So it was 21. Okay. Maybe fall of 21, I guess. Yeah. But everybody was still really nervous. And we were all kind of wondering, should we be here? Are we? But regardless, it was just a really weird, cold, detached kind of situation. I thought, I don't know if I'm that, because in order for me to want to do it, I really gotta. And this kind of goes for anything I do in life. I really need to feel connected to it. I really need to feel like I'm giving and I'm receiving, and they're doing the same thing. And if not, I just go home. I got a fantastic family, live in a great community here in the Shoals, and I don't have to do things that I used to have to do, but it's gotten better and better, and I've gotten better and better at the job. It's a lot more prep work than I thought it'd be.
Interesting. How do you prep for like a songwriting course?
Well, I got some good advice from the dean. He said, just look at it as 20 gigs, but you can't play the same songs. You got to play all new songs. I thought that's a great way to look at it. So I had to start thinking, all right, songwriting, let's break this down into subsets, and enough of them that it would cover this amount of classes, or 2 classes would be on this one subject. And I'm still getting that right. I don't feel like I've got it right yet, but I get distracted. So I print up a bunch of stuff to have in front of me to keep me on task, because we'll talk about something that we should talk about class 4. I'm not used to that. And one thing I got ace in the hole is my wife's a teacher, and she stays at home now with our 3 kids, but she taught for like 12 years. So I have a sounding board. Yeah. And she, like everybody else, said, "You're doing fine. Stop stressing about it. It's, I guarantee, you know," and I think that was true. I think I was going to stress regardless, but they told me at UNA, it was like, first year, you just hold on for dear life. Second year, you'll start easing into it and figuring it out. But first year, we want you here and we want you trying, but
That's all you got to do. Just show up.
Yeah. But I can't do that. I cannot do that.
Yeah. That sort of brings up an interesting point about the writing process anyway. Like when you teach songwriting, you know, I've done a number of, like, you know, I'm a guitar player mostly, but I also end up doing some like songwriting workshops sometimes. And if you're doing a one-off, I find it's a bit of a struggle, you know, because it's just really hard to gauge people and where they are and what they want to get out of it. But I would imagine something that develops over a whole semester, you get to approach it a little differently. Do you have like a set method of going in with a class, or do you kind of need to suss out where all the students are at, or how do you gauge?
A little above. Yeah. My very first class seemed to be a little more experienced. There was a lot of, because it was the first year, it was a bunch of seniors that were getting ready to graduate, or they needed electives, or they were in a different career track, but I'm teaching it, so they want to take it. So all the people that are really motivated, they were in there, and that made it easier. Subsequent classes have gotten younger and less experienced. And to the point that my last class, I think 70 to 80% of the class had never written a song in their life.
Whoa.
And that's tough.
Yeah.
It's very tough. But it's also, you know, I enjoy it as well, because I'm pretty far removed from that, but not so far that I don't remember the struggles that I had and things that I wish I could tell younger me. Listen, quit worrying about this. Focus on this, that kind of thing. And I can do that for them. Yeah. I don't know how many of them will end up being career songwriters. The odds are really low nowadays with the way especially with the way the Nashville market works. It's completely different than when I got my first deal in '98. It's a whole different world. And I know hit songwriters that are sitting without a deal and can't get a sniff. And I warn them about that. I warn them about how hard it is. But we also talk about songwriting as an artist or songwriting as a producer.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So songwriting, yeah. And collaboration, how to do that, how not to do that. We talk about business, contracts and publishing and where your money comes from and stuff like that. And I hope by the end of the semester they haven't decided, hell no, I'm not going to be a songwriter. But it's not for the meek, so I make sure that there's a dose of reality in it.
Yeah, that's important, I think. Yeah, in the ones that I've been involved in, I always find the biggest thing to like get through with people is there seems to be like a painful amount of like self-editing that happens with either young or inexperienced writers, where they're like getting hung up on where the song's going to end up, or who you know, how they're going to get airplay for it, and does it have this element that every other song does, you know, like these things that get young writers sort of hung up. And I'm sure you must see certain patterns too in the classes that you teach, right? Definitely. I think it's every personality, every person is going to attack it in a different way that works for them. But more often than not, I try to counsel them that you need to know as much about music as you can. You need to be as educated as humanly possible, all genres. You will steal. We all do. And you need as much on the palette as you possibly can get. And that's something that most of them, like when I play them songs in class, classics that like, here's an example of this technique or whatever. You can tell by looking in their eyes, they have no idea any of the things I'm playing.
And
Wow.
it's like Chris Christopherson and
Oh,
Townes
man.
Van Zandt, Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, and Joni Mitchell, and they're just blank.
Wow.
Like that's where you're going to have to start. Is you've got to. You don't have to like it. You don't have to aspire to be it, but you need the tools in the box to be able to access what you need to when you need to on the spot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of lyric appreciation and structure and stuff like that. But more often than not, and this ain't for everybody, but for me, I learned the day that I stopped trying to please anybody else with my song was the day that I started getting cuts. Same thing with me getting a record deal. The day I just quit trying to be what I thought other people wanted me to be because I wanted to please, I want to entertain. When I got really desperate and said, yeah, I'm just going to do this for myself because that ain't working. Then everything started clicking. And I said, everybody's at a different point in their lives where they figure that out. You may figure it out young. I wish I had. I was 30 before I figured that out. And let that inform your songwriting. Write songs that you want to hear on the radio, that you want to listen to, that you want to play for people and say, that's me. That's who I am. And if that's your criteria, the flip side of that is you cannot control whether other people like what you do. You can't. You can't chase it. I don't know anybody there's probably some people that are good at mimicking and
There's a few.
writing. Yeah. And more power to them. I couldn't do it. I'm wired a certain way. My brain and my voice works in certain patterns. So
One other interesting thing about the whole teaching thing from like coming at it as a successful artist like you are, do you run into like a cross section of people that are aware of who you are and aren't aware of who you are? Are you just like Professor White to some kids? Or
I think in there they all know who I am.
Okay.
But they may not know the music.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had multiple students tell me I didn't listen to your music until I knew I was taking your class.
Yeah.
Multiple students that didn't know that I was in Florence and that I was part of that program back in my younger days. It's like, it's crazy how this information age, you can know everything.
Yeah.
But, everybody runs in their little patterns. And so when they announced I was going to teach over there, I mean, there were so many comments. I had no idea that he was in Florence. Or after I'd been teaching for a couple of years, about a year, there was a story about it. And people on campus were saying, I had no idea he was teaching here. So as much info as people have, there's so much noise to get through that takes a while to get the message out.
What was your background as far, like you mentioned how important like musical knowledge is. And on one hand, that's like understanding, the genre and the early material and like being able to pull from John Prine and Roy Orbison and Joni Mitchell and all that. But also like musical education, like you're a well-versed guitar player too. Like were you educated as a kid growing up at all in music, or was that something that you were sort of self-taught along the way as you needed it?
I was definitely self-taught. I grew up on a chicken farm out in the middle of nowhere, just across the state line in Loretta, Tennessee, which is about 25 minutes up the road. I've never lived outside of this circle.
Wow.
But grew up on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, and nobody in my family played. They were music lovers to a point, but not obsessive about it at all. And they just turned the radio on in the car, and that's when we heard music.
Yeah.
There was a record player that barely worked. There was an 8-track player that we probably had 7, and we just wore them out. But it wasn't their thing. I did have aunts that played in church. So I would get recruited to sing in church because in a really small town, people figure out really quick if you can carry your tune or not. All right, step forward. You're going to be the soloist for this. guitar didn't come along until I was way into my teens. And it really didn't happen until I was in college and later. Because again, when you're from the small town, the guitar players in town are like, put the guitar down, get up there and sing. We got this. You don't need, and I was like, I don't care. Fine.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to do it. And it didn't really drive me. I wasn't a guy that when I picked it up, was like, oh, this is going to be my life. When I got in front of a microphone, guitar was the means to an end. And when I got to college, all my band members back in the day had gone on and done gotten married and had jobs. So if I wanted to do anything, I had to accompany myself. So I would just usually every time I saw somebody play, I would just sit there and try to memorize the shapes of their hands and then go do it later. But I didn't know what I was playing a lot of times. I didn't know what chord it was. I didn't know what note. But I started understanding the math of it.
Yep.
And how intervals work. I didn't know what an interval was, but I could hear it in my head that, okay, that's the one, that's the root. And if you went to a 4, if I was listening to a record, if you went to, let's say you're in G and you went to a C, I got to where I could hear that. And there's the 5. And I learned the numbers later, but when somebody showed me the natural number system, I was like, this makes perfect sense to me because this is how my brain works because I'm not thinking letters. Somebody says, what chord is that right there? I start having to count. I have to work my way up from the nut. And I think that's, a June Carter quote where she told Johnny was complaining about, I can't sing and I can't play. And she was like, I don't remember exactly how she said it, but she said, basically you need to embrace what you can do and do the very best possible. And no one else can do it, what you're doing. Everyone's unique. Just own it, sing louder, play louder, and
that's good advice.
Make your mark. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I get that. I get that I don't play like anybody else, but they don't play like me. And I would come up with stuff uneducated, ignorant to how you should play it. I'd just figure it out on my guitar and open strings. Oh, that sounds good with this. I'm going to change that chord. Or, man, this would be so much easier if this note was lower. So I'd change tunings.
Yep.
And it was all just trial and error. And then I wrote stuff that I'd go into the studio and the guys be like, can you play that for us? Because we're not sure what you're doing. And then they'll see it and they'll realize how simple it is. A lot of the stuff, especially with the Civil Wars, very simple once you see through the smoke and mirrors of how I'm playing it.
That's interesting because there is a fair chunk of that stuff that's like guitar wise, it's like it does make you stop and listen and be like, what the hell is going on?
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, man.
It's on purpose because it's part me being self-conscious about my guitar playing and knowing that other people technically are better players than I am. And so I have to put something interesting in there to set me apart. Also, because I will lose interest in my own music if there's not something compelling.
Yeah.
But on top of that, for a while, I was just accompanying myself. And then with the Civil Wars, it's just 2 voices, 1 guitar. So the guitar can't just be strumming G, C, D and it be interesting all night. I have to do things that complement what we're singing, that fit in the holes of what we're singing, that is a harmony to what we're singing so that our 2 voices and the guitar sort of is three part.
Yeah. And you don't want to be stepping all over the vocal range and all that stuff. Yeah.
No. And I'm a singer at heart, so I'm really attuned to that. To not getting in the singers and the song's way. And there's I didn't know I was doing that. I didn't realize I was doing it. I just wanted to entertain. And I knew when I played a song, like, that was boring. The melodies were good, the lyrics were good, but the arrangement, the accompaniment was just boring. Anybody could do what I just did, and I couldn't have that.
Right.
So I'd sneak an odd. There's a fine line to that, to distract. If you do something that's too clever, it brings them out of the song and they're paying attention to your guitar.
Right.
For me, that's verboten. It's got to be one continuous, nothing outweighs the other when I compose something. So, but that was all just trial and error and me trying to mimic, my heroes without knowing I was doing it.
So who were some of those people that you heard doing that could actually do what you're talking about, which is like effectively accompany themselves in a way that's interesting but not distracting?
Elliott Smith was the first guy that really made me make sense, because I was kind of going down that road already. And when I heard it, I felt like we must have grown up listening to the same things, because I feel like I could have wrote this stuff. I mean, it was above my pay grade at the time. It was like everything he's doing makes sense to me. It's exactly what I want from music, and that was a big one. Jeff Buckley was a big one.
Yeah.
Jeff wasn't quite as much unaccompanied, but he did, usually on electric guitar. Very underrated guitar player.
Yeah.
It was still all about his voice, all about the song. Those were the main ones, but the simpler ones were, Chris and John Prine, who you mentioned earlier. I was very lucky to get to know him and consider him a friend and play a bunch of shows with him. And I was really happy to get to tell him that my finger picking is 1,000% pulled from the way you finger pick. And he got such a kick out of that.
Yeah.
Because he thinks he sucks, which
right.
most of us think we suck. I'm like, no, man. I said, if you listen, I'm doing the same pattern as you typically do. And I wasn't trying to, but by osmosis, it became part of who I was.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. That's funny that he thought he sucked too, because like I can see why, like two sides of it. I can see why he would maybe think that, because it is so simple, but it's also like it's so effectively compelling that it's he's to me like a great guitar player, even though he's not really thought of in that context. Amen.
I agree wholeheartedly.
You mentioned like playing in college and stuff like that. Were you like singing in bands? Did you have a project going before you were working as a writer and before you were working as a recording artist? Were there like college bands or high school bands that you were involved in?
High school bands. When I first went to college many, many years ago.
Yeah.
The first one of note was called Nothing Fancy, which was named after the Lynyrd Skynyrd album Nothing Fancy.
Nice.
Spelled the same way as well.
Yeah.
And we a couple other bands after that, but after about 4 years of that, I decided there's no record company man going to come down here to Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, or to Florence, Alabama, and slap a contract on the back of the Cadillac and sign me up and make me like you always dream of.
Yeah.
It just wasn't happening. And I could have been a billion miles from Nashville because I had zero contacts up there. This is pre-internet, so there's no way to really...
It's like an hour away.
Yeah. From Lawrenceburg, we're just down the road. So I decided I need to go back to college because this ain't working and I can't afford to move to Nashville. So when I got to college, it was mostly me by myself. Every once in a while, I'd play with one guy, or there'd be like a trio of acoustic guitars and we'd play, Widespread Panic and crap like that everybody wanted to hear. Because I'm still a people pleaser. I still want to entertain. Like, is that what you want to hear? Fine. I don't have to like it. But it was mostly me by myself. And that was, I had to make a pretty steep ascent to get to where I could do that. Because I'd always
pull off a solo show, you mean?
Yeah.
Did you have enough original material at that point? Or were you doing covers and stuff?
All covers.
Okay.
The reason I started writing songs was not because I wanted to write songs. It's because I wanted to sing. And Walt Aldridge was like adjunct faculty. And Jana Malone, who is running the program right now, introduced me to, she said, I'll introduce you to Walt. I think, you've got something that I think he'd be interested in. She'd heard me sing. And I said, well, okay, but I think I need to write 2 or 3 songs so that he doesn't judge my voice. He doesn't compare it to the original. If I sing a cover, it's an automatic. You can't help yourself. You think about the original and you compare the two. And I was just wise enough to realize, like, I need to get that out of the way and it just stand. I was stupid enough to think that I could write a good enough song that he would be interested in. So I wrote 3 songs, recorded them in the UNA studio, which was just an 8-track tape machine, and that was about it. And gave it to him, and he wanted to work with me, but not as a singer, as a songwriter.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. He heard the promise in it more than he heard in my voice, which broke my heart. But I also thought, fine, I want in the door. And if this is the way in the door, I'm a songwriter. I'll do it. Mm-hmm. So I went and interned for him. And he had started his own company. It was a joint venture with EMI. So I didn't even have to leave the Shoals. It was right there by campus. It's called Walt's Time. And for that whole summer, I was just going upstairs and beat my head against the wall and trying to write songs. And eventually he sent one of them to EMI, and they're like, all right, we'll sign this one song. And so I got a taste of it. It was just a per song contract. And
how does that work? I've actually never heard of that.
I haven't heard of it since, but it sounds like it happened a lot back then because there were so many songwriters and only so many deals to go around. But every once in a while they'd hear somebody would come in with a batch of songs and be one that they thought, that's a hit. I don't know if that person can ever write another great song. That song's a hit. And they'd sign just that one song. And weird. Same kind of contract, but only one song involved. And so that was my first contract. And then
what happened to that song? Did it?
Nothing. No, it got me in a lot of doors. It was a song called Change Your Mind, and it was a minor key, waltzy.
Oh, that's 2 strikes right there.
I know. It was like dark and Southern Gothic, and like no one wanted that shit.
Yeah.
But everybody liked it. Everybody would be like, man, this is really good. You want to write with one of our writers? Or can I write with you?
Oh, cool. So did it sort of open up the co-writing world a bit?
Yeah. And I figured that out early on, that in that world, companies were trying to diversify themselves. So EMI had Melba Montgomery, and they had Brad Paisley, and they had all these people that did more traditional stuff, if that's what you wanted. But if you wanted something that leaned more edgy, wasn't called Americana yet, but, leans towards Son Volt or Wilco or whatever. But also I loved British rock, and so it leaned toward the Beatles and ELO. I was the guy. So if somebody came in from LA or from New York, I could bridge the gap between what they knew and what the country music market would allow. And so I had a enviable position. Like all the cool stuff that came to town, I'd end up in the room with them.
So who were you working for at that time then?
You mean like company or artists?
Well, like so they're setting you up with all these co-writes, but are you getting paid?
Yes, monthly.
Okay. Monthly.
It's a monthly draw. And I was on a monthly draw from 98 until 2 years ago. It was the way that I'd formulate my life around being able to live on that draw.
Yeah.
And then if I made money, awesome. If I made money playing shows, awesome. But I always knew I had that base.
And EMI was the employer.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I was 10 years, and then 10 years at BMG, and a little while at Warner Chappell. Yeah. Wow. And at that time, I don't want to get sideways with too many people, but at the time, the publisher was a very, very powerful, integral part of your team because they had pitch meetings. And some of them had really good relationships with certain producers, and they'd take your song in and they'd establish, they would build you up, and they'd be like, "Hey, I got new John Paul White songs coming. Can I come pitch you songs?" "Yeah, come on. I want to hear them first."
Yeah.
All that happened. That was everybody was leveraging and
Wow.
lobbying and like, "I'm not going to cut this unless you cut this," and it was fun. And you always felt like when you sat down and wrote with somebody, if you wrote a song that was great, if you both thought it was a great song, you had a very good shot. You probably were going to get a cut, but even if you didn't, it was going to be on hold. It was going to go into the studio. And so that was exciting.
Yeah.
Now, that's not true anymore.
Right.
It's not true at all. If you don't write with the artist or with the producer, or you're not a part of the publishing company that the artist is, or the producer is, or the label owns, or whatever, then
you're out.
Yeah. I mean, when I did the last record, The Hurtin' Kind, I played with people like Bill Anderson, and I wrote with people like Bill Anderson and Bobby Braddock, but also Paul Overstreet and Win Varble and folks like that. And they would tell me like, and it's slim pickings out here because, this is fun, but the chances of, unless you cut it, John, the chances of this song ever getting out to the public are just minimal, just tiny, without some sort of connection to an artist. And I think they're already seeing the problems with that sort of mentality. And it's just going to get worse because all these writers I'm talking about are going to move on. Yeah. They're not going to be able to pay their bills. And so they're going to have to do something else. And all the future Bobby Braddocks are going to go do something else. And so the song quality just keeps doing that. Because these people are doing it every single day, and they're immersed in it all the time, and they obsess about it. And artists can't do that. They write songs only for themselves. Professional songwriters can write anything they want to any day of the week for anybody. And it just frees you up so much to not have a box to fit in. So unless we have a big batch of artists come to town that are great songwriters, which the odds are not great for that, it's just going to get more and more homogenized. And,
I agree.
Yeah.
What were some of your successes in that era? Like I'm not aware of what I mean, it sounds like you were writing so many songs so regularly. You must have had some serious hits and stuff at that point. What were some of those? Well, again, the beauty of being in that age, people sold records. Yeah. So if I got a song on an album, like a Rascal Flatts album, that was my first big cut. Oh yeah.
It was on that Feels Like Today record. It's called Holes. And that record, it sold 3 or 4 million, and which no one does now. Yeah. But just being on the record, all those mechanicals that came in, my label's thrilled. And so that became who I was. I knew that the chances were slim that I'd get a single because I wrote stuff that was so out in left field. But every artist up there wished they were rock singers, wished they were pop singers. Yeah. But they were country singers. And so, again, I bridged that gap. I could write songs that felt like country songs because lyrically they were, but it had an edge to it and a little bit different skew to it. And they all would cut them for their records. Yeah. They wouldn't single them, but they would cut them because they wanted to. So like, Faith Hill and Leanne Rimes and the first single I had, I think it was the first single. The first single of note for sure was a song with Jason Aldean called Relentless, which ended up being the title of the record. Whoa. And that went to top 15, I think. That's the most successful cut I'd had. And by that time, I was starting to just write for me. I was starting to use EMI's money to make big, nice sounding demos of songs that I loved. Right. And was getting interest from New York and from LA, EMI. Ended up getting a record deal based on those demos, a rock deal with Capitol. LA.
So
It was all
was that
because of
something
that.
you were aiming for, or did that just like come around and sort of fall in your lap?
I was always aiming for it,
Okay.
whether I said it out loud or not.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be an artist. I always did, and I was never going to be satisfied if I didn't at least get a shot at it, make a record,
Right.
see what happens. I could live with whether it, because I'd already figured out people are going to like it or they're not, and there's nothing I can do about it. I just got to make sure I like it.
Yeah.
And so I thought, if I can just make a record that I love, I can walk away. I can tell my grandkids, here's something I did
Yeah.
for a while. It was a lot of fun, but it wasn't meant to be. And so, yeah, that was always in the back of my head. I think all of my decisions were based on getting me there.
That was Long Goodbye in 2008,
Yeah.
right? So between 98 and 2008, you were strictly writing and co-writing for people.
I was. I was on the side, was doing little stuff for myself, but I do a showcase every other year, and test the waters and say I'm still too weird for these people. Go back to what I was doing because I was enjoying myself. I had a lot of fun doing it. I was learning every single day. I was learning how to write a song.
Yep.
I was learning how to collaborate with a stranger right off the bat. I got really good at it. I got really good at turning it on and turning it back off.
That's so cool.
Like, you ever seen Over the Top?
Yeah.
That was me. It was me, when I'd go into a session, I'd become songwriter John, and then on the drive home,
just flip it back.
Husband, dad, homeowner.
Yeah.
And I got to where I could do that. And I think it was really good for me psychologically to be able to shift gears and not be immersed in it all the time. Because if I lived in Nashville, I would have worked every single day, all day. I know I would have. Living here, there's only 3 or 4 people that do what I do. And so I didn't have a choice but to take a day off and do something else, or write on my own, or practice my guitar or whatever. So
that's interesting.
That
so you always, like, you never made the move to Nashville?
No.
There must have been somebody saying, hey man, you need to live here. Or did they just think that you did?
I was saying it. I just couldn't afford it.
Really?
And it was way cheaper then than it is now.
Yeah.
I don't know how, when I have kids over here that want to intern in Nashville, I'm like, man, all right, well, have you looked at housing yet? It's crazy. It's cost prohibitive. But at the time, I wasn't making any money. I was barely, I had a kid and a house and a wife, and she was teaching at a private school. So we weren't making a lot of money, and there's no way we could move.
Really?
Nashville. And I wanted to. Any town you grow up in, it's boring. It doesn't matter if it's Muscle Shoals or if you grow up in New Orleans, or you're sick of it.
Yeah.
By the time you get in your 20s, you're sick of it.
You want to get out of
there. And I had so many friends up there, and I knew all the opportunities that I would have, but I couldn't do it. But I eventually, the more I did it, the more I realized what a great thing I had, that distance.
Yeah.
Like, what would happen up there is like, what would have happened is when somebody canceled a co-write, EMI would have called me that morning and said, hey, are you free? There's a co-write for you. And I'd have took it. But I'm 2.5 hours away. They can't do that.
Right.
And there's good and bad to that. Mostly good, I think.
Yeah. It may not have seemed like it at the time, but you're probably right. Like, it probably was good.
I felt like I was missing out on stuff for sure. But and I was in a way, but I'd have burned out. I would have totally burned it at both ends, and I'd have just been fried. I wouldn't have anything. I needed time to recover and recuperate and get ideas and get a head of steam and go into 2 or 3 co-writes in 2 days and really hit it.
So
really get it right.
What did it actually look like? Were you traveling? Were you commuting to Nashville to do all those co-writes, or was EMI sending people down to Florence to you? Later,
people were coming down, but at that time it was all me going up there. And
so you were commuting like 2 or 3 times a week?
Yes and no. At first I was doing that because I didn't have the power of my calendar to convince people, hey, I'm just working Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever.
Right.
I just took what I could get.
Yeah.
But at some point I was able to have a little bit of say about it. And I'd go up and I had multiple dudes that I'd sleep on their couch, or they had a guest room or whatever. And it was great. It was almost like I was on tour.
Yeah.
And I think it was good for my brain, because this town is so slow, and especially at that time, not super cultured. I mean, very, if you're wanting to immerse yourself into the Southern thing. But if you wanted some Thai food or Vietnamese food or Indian food, forget it. If you wanted something that wasn't fried, forget it.
Well, Nashville was kind of like that too back then, right? Like, it's not now, but it was.
You could find options, but yeah, it was just a bigger, more expensive version of us. But I would stay 2, sometimes 3 days. That helped my wife wrap her head around the idea of me being gone and playing music.
Right.
So when touring came along, it wasn't such an abrupt, okay, I've been here every day, but I'm going to be gone for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah.
We had a little bit more of an understanding of that. Still very hard, especially with a small child.
No doubt. Yeah.
But to her credit, I think part of it was she knew it was my dream. She knew it was my passion and my obsession. She loved what I did. She loved the songs. And I think she, like me, saw the potential of what it could be. She's a teacher at heart. She grew up wanting to be a teacher. She knew, here's exactly what you do to become a teacher. Then you teach for 40 years and then you retire. That's what my life's going to be. I'm like, my brain does not work that way. And I think that was good for her that, we were opposites. It's our 25th anniversary this year. And I always joke that in musician years, that's like 143 or something like that. And we've been through it, but she saw that there was a lot of potential there. And sometimes when I didn't, and vice versa, we'd keep it going. But there was many times of me saying, I need to come home because this is not working on a level that we can pay our bills. And every publishing contract is 1 year,
right? With
options. So at the end of every single year from 98 to, till 2 or 3 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. Every year you wondered, will I get picked up? Because it was not your choice.
Right.
That's a tenuous place to live for 25 years. I got used to it. But now with UNA, it's like, God, this is weird. I don't have a guarantee I'm always going to have a job over here, but I got as close to one as I could get because who else is going to live in the Shoals and do what I do with the ties that I have to the program? And so I got pretty good job security, but I never had job security until now.
Yeah, man. I certainly don't.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm worried I'll lose some edge, because I have a backup plan. I have a base. I think you make decisions a little differently. I think I'd be more adventurous. I think I'd probably work more than I am right now. And I gotta do something about that. I gotta get that old motivation back, that hunger, that fear of losing my gig back, because that's when I create best. Yeah.
So when you did The Long Goodbye, did you have to like forego some of the writing stuff, or like how did you wrangle that with your publishing contract? Like, were they understanding and they were just like, well, yeah, you go make a record because it's all part of the picture? That's it. Okay. And again, really big company, really diversified company. It was a feather in their hat because all the Nashville companies wanted to work with New York.
wanted to work with LA, but there was always this little stepbrother kind of thing of like Nashville. And they'd tell me, they'd be like, when somebody from Nashville sends me something and says this is really cool and rock and roll or whatever, we always roll our eyes because it's not. And in their perspective, it is.
Yeah.
But when you're doing it every day with real rock and roll artists, like, no, this is a cheesy knockoff of that. But a lot of times they would say, but when we heard your stuff, it was like, okay, there's potential here. And EMI was just thrilled to be able to say they were able to do that. And they were integral to me getting a record deal in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Being able to say that to prospective songwriters they're trying to sign,
yeah,
I understood it. But again, I wrote all those songs, and so they stood to make some money.
Right.
But that record was a culmination of the 10 years before. I was able to just pick all my best stuff.
Yeah, that's a long period of time of like having not made a record where you can pull from.
And that's, most artists, their first record, they've probably been working on stuff since they were teenagers.
Yeah.
So by the time they actually make that record, it's songs that have 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why the second album usually sucks.
That's right.
Because they've got 6 months to write the next record, and they don't do it all the time. They're not seasoned songwriters. It was easy for me.
Yeah.
Because that's what I did every day.
Totally.
And
it was a finely tuned muscle for you, I bet.
It was. It wasn't always good. It wasn't always great, but I never just stared at the page. I never didn't have something to say or something to play or a melody that would pop in my head. It was a superpower that I don't know how much we go into this, but it's a superpower that I feel like there's kryptonite around here or something right now. Because when COVID came along, I stopped thinking about it. I was just thinking about protecting my family and how are we going to make it through this without touring? How am I going to songwrite without being able to be in a room with somebody? All those things. So my focus changed. And then when I tried to write, I wasn't living. I was in 4 walls with 4 other people every single day. And I had no real life experiences to write about. Everything that I started writing about felt trivial. Knowing people are dying out there and just the uncertainty of where we were heading. Songs about my broken heart seemed silly.
Yeah. And
so I just put it away and be like, well, I'll get back to it later. I think I figured out that there's some sort of correlation between traveling, interacting, connecting with people, and creativity. And once that went away, I was just stifled. I just stared at the page. I'd play stuff and it sounded like everything I'd already played.
Did that freak you out? Because you'd never had like writer's block really in that way, if that's what it was?
It still terrifies me because I still ain't got it back the way that I want it. Mm-hmm. This summer is going to be spent every day trying to get back in that groove again and have something to say. But yeah, I'd never in my life had writer's block. It'd always just been a faucet just running and trying to catch it all.
That is a superpower.
It is. And when you lose it, you feel mortal.
Yeah.
And I know that I have other skills that make me happy in the interim. I've been producing records over here. I've got a studio next door that I started with Ben Tanner with Alabama Shakes. We've been working together about 10 years now. Also, Single Lock Records, which we started 10 years ago as well. So those two things are something that I love and keeps me as occupied as I want to be. Whether I want to write a song again or not, I can't rest without knowing I can.
Right.
Can't walk away. And I told my wife, I said, I don't know if I've got another record in me or not. I don't know if I have got more touring in me or not, I'll follow my nose. But the idea that I can't write a song is something I just won't accept.
So what about with when you started the Civil Wars? Was that like a whole different gear shift that you were comfortable with as well? Because that was sort of like you were writing material. I mean, I guess you were co-writing a lot of that as well, but like a lot of it was geared towards sort of a different thing altogether, right? It was like geared towards those two voices, and
it was just a happy accident meeting her in the first place. You know, it was a songwriting camp and about 25 writers, and we drew straws and we ended up in the room together. And I didn't know she existed. I didn't know she existed. She didn't know I existed. She didn't have any reason to know I existed because, you know, all my stuff had been marginal and you'd have to be a big country music fan to know it. She had sold like 250,000 records in the CCM world, but she was unknown to me.
Yeah.
So when we started working together, it was really weird how, you know, she didn't have a big country background. So she would kind of gravitate toward the times when I would do something country. It was novel to her, and vice versa. She was a pop girl. And I grew up on pop music. I love pop music. I don't really incorporate it into my songs that much at that time. And so I just embraced it. But there was also, I had lost my deal with Capitol Records because Capitol and Virgin merged together.
Okay.
Jason Flom took over. Jason was running Virgin. So all the Virgin artists were safe. All the Capitol artists that their record hadn't come out yet, go.
Wow.
And which, you know, at the end of the day, knowing that it was just a business decision, it didn't hurt as bad as we don't think your record's good, so we're not going to put it out. And they gave me my record back. They let me put it out if I wanted to. But I was really bitter. And I really tried hard to please a lot of people while I was making that record. I made sure I pleased myself, but I had an A&R guy, and I had a president of the label, and I had management, and you know, the whole team that all relied on me to do the best I could do. And I felt that, and so I did things. Not that I didn't really want to do them, but it wouldn't have been my first choice. I'd have done it a little bit different way. So after that, losing the deal, I went back to my old rhetoric of like, you just need to please yourself and stop trying to please somebody else. And I just got really desperate. And when we met each other, she had just got out of her deal, and it was very contentious. They didn't want to let her out. She didn't want to do that CCM thing anymore. So we were both kind of cynical, bitter, and it became us against the world. It became, you know, we don't care if anybody likes this or not. We don't care if we play to 5 people. We like it. We think it's compelling and it's good, and I want to keep doing it.
Did it come together really quickly and naturally?
Yeah, really fast. The first song we wrote was nothing really happened with it. It was a third co-writer in the room, Greg Becker, who's one of my best friends and one of the best lyricist songwriters in Nashville. But he said, I felt like neither one of you knew I was in the room. and he's laughing about it. It was just like, I was just sitting there just watching because we were figuring out,
he's like,
you
hello?
like this band? Yeah. It's like the Friends episode when Joey wants to know about Ross's 3-way. And Ross said, well, you know what it's like when you're in a room and the other 2 people have no idea you're there? That's what it was like. I get that. But we wrote another song, and I had her sing on the song of mine. And it was If I Didn't Know Better.
Okay.
Which was cut Nashville. T-Bone Burnett cut that for Nashville. If I Didn't Know Better, I wrote with an artist named Aram Ray, who is coming down to work in my studio this summer. We've stayed close. She's fantastic. I'm glad you know her. We're going to do don't tell anybody, we're going to do a little Christmas EP.
Right. Yeah.
I've never done. I'm excited about that. But we had written that song, and I was like, well, we need to do a work tape for our song Falling, which is the first song that we wrote together, really, just the 2 of us. Mm-hmm. And If I Didn't Know Better, I said, will you sing the female part on this that Aram was singing? Because Aram's in Savannah, Georgia, and not going to be around anytime soon. And we just need a work day. And it was apparent,
Right
it
then,
was different.
right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was fast.
Okay.
It was fast.
And
Yeah.
so did you guys make that the first record on your own, or did you have a deal at that point, or did you just fund it yourself and end up shopping it around?
We never had a deal.
Okay.
In the life of the band, until the band broke up, it was Sensibility Records, which was her husband.
Wow.
Her and her husband had started the company mostly with the plan of doing her solo stuff, and then Civil Wars came along and we became part of that. But it was the three of us, no one else, and so little by little, we found Frank Riley at High Road Touring as our booking agency, and we got Carlos Sachs, Sachs and Co. to do our PR and things like that. And we just started touring, and things kept growing. We just kept saying, all right, people would reach out, Dual Tone or Rounder, or whatever, the smaller independent.
Yeah.
They would reach out and like, hey, we'd be interested in working with y'all. Hell yeah. I love, especially Rounder. I was just like, I grew up on those bluegrass records.
Yeah, man.
I was an obsessive J.D. Crowe and Nashville Bluegrass Band, and all that stuff was just a big deal to me. And so I was thrilled. But every time we'd have the meetings, we'd realize, once we got the stars out of our eyes, that they're not really offering to do anything we're not already doing on our own.
And keeping all the money.
Yes. And keeping all the creative control.
Yep.
And, all the decisions, it's us. And that's hard, but I don't want to give that up. Somebody's going to have to offer something that's a deal breaker. That's like,
right,
we can't say no to this. And we weren't at a point where somebody's going to give us that kind of deal.
Yeah.
So we'd always say thanks, but no thanks. And after the band broke up, we weren't able to do that anymore. So we signed with Columbia, and they dealt all the stuff.
Oh, okay.
We had already signed a deal with Columbia overseas.
Yeah.
We figured out at some point we can't do it worldwide.
Right. Yeah.
Hard enough to do. The United States, yeah.
You worked with Charlie Peacock on those records, and there's something, I don't know what the affiliation is with Rick Rubin. Like what did you do with him exactly?
So after the first record, we were touring constantly, and management, Nate, was getting lots of requests from different producers and labels and stuff. And he said, do you want to meet with any of these people? And I'm like, well, I don't know how anybody could make a better record than Charlie did. But yeah, I'd like to meet these people, Ethan Johns and Pierre Marchand and Marius DeVries and Rick Rubin, T.O. Burnett, people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, heck yeah, I'm not going to pass up the opportunity to ask them about records that made me who I am. And so we were touring West Coast, and I don't know if Rick reached out. I don't know who reached out to who, but we ended up out there at Shangri-La and Malibu.
Yeah.
And had lots of, as you would expect, very deep conversations. It's very obvious very quickly why he's made the best record that most artists have made. In their discography, the Rick Rubin ones were, to me, the better ones, but they were also usually the more successful ones.
Tell me about your theory on that, because like I'm a producer myself and I make a lot of records and stuff, and I have never quite been able to wrap my head around the Rick Rubin thing. Like what?
Okay.
And so you worked with him. Yeah, please.
I will tell you it, and it sounds too simple. It sounds too good to be true, and it sounds like, well, I do that. Rick doesn't play.
Yeah.
He could not play a chord if he wanted to. He has no idea how to pull up a vocal on a channel. Tech illiterate. No idea. very educated when it comes to music,
Yep.
recorded music history. He knows it all and pulls from it all. But the thing that he does that I've never been around, T-Bone's kind of close. He makes you feel like the greatest artist on the face of the planet. He gives you this singular attention and appreciation of what you're doing, and he notices things and he brings it up. It's like nobody's ever said that before. Nobody's ever noticed that we do that. And we so we had one day, and he said, "Why don't you go in the studio and you got anything that haven't recorded yet?" Yeah, we got 3 or 4 songs that really need demos. So, well, let's do it. And just you two and the guitar like you normally do live. And that's what we did. And we'd do a song and he'd come out and give little suggestions. Most often the suggestion would be, you need to be thinking about what you're singing. And I need to feel that emotion of that line, because your lines are very emotional, but you can't just be performing for me. I got to feel that. And that was good. It was hard because we didn't know the songs that well yet.
Yeah.
So you're trying to stop thinking. So we did that for a day, and he came to our show that night at Largo, which was an honor that he came, and thought that was it. Thought that was the end of it. Because ultimately I decided Charlie's still the guy. He's Rick Rubin, and I understand why he's Rick Rubin. I talked to him about the Cult and about Slayer and, those records, the Black Crows and records that made me. And he had great stories about him. And I just started seeing why people worked with him. But Charlie was the guy. I mean, he had done nothing not to be the producer for the next record. So that was all fun, but we moved on. Well, then the band broke up. And there was material that wasn't finished. They went back and listened to those recordings.
Okay.
Decided to finish them up.
Yep.
So that's how that happened.
Okay.
It came from that one day of demoing songs at his place, and then it got built around and made into the record.
Okay.
Only a couple of tracks. I don't even remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. So, it gets brought up a lot, like, what's it like working with Rick Rubin? And it's great, but it was just one afternoon, really.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, he stayed in touch. Like, if I ever have anything new, I'll email him, and I'll get an email back just like that. I've been wondering what you've been doing. I can't wait to listen to this. Like, do you know who you are? You don't need to answer my email. I'm glad you do. But me as label owner, as producer, it was a good lesson.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, just being around people like that there's a lot to be gleaned from that situation.
One of the things that people don't like about Rick, or they definitely call him out for, and same thing with T-Bone, is this notion that he doesn't show up for the session.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's not true. We didn't have that experience. Maybe we would have, maybe not. But I think Rick and T-Bone, one of their other great strengths is they get people in the room that they know what they do, and they know that what they do is perfect for what you do.
Yep. And
they get out of the way, and they let the conversation happen, and everything happens organically. And they come in and they poke or they steer, and like, hey, how about less of that but more of this?
Yeah.
And most of the players on those records, they're producers as well.
Right.
So you got a bunch of people helping produce this record for you.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds easy on the surface, but I don't know anybody else that's good at that. Dave Cobb has definitely followed in the footsteps of T-Bone in that way. He surrounds artists with he makes them feel like $1 million and got great gear, and they make their best records.
Joe Henry.
But not Joe Henry, yeah. Just not a lot of people can do that.
On your records, you guys had a lot of the top call Nashville people, like Dan Dugmore's on there, and Barry Bales is on there, JT Cornfloss, like some of those guys that are like studio stalwarts. Was that like were you guys all tracking those together? Was that how you rolled with those records?
No.
Okay, so you do your thing.
Every
and then...
track, every track was she and I and my acoustic guitar live around 2 vocal mics and 1 acoustic mic.
Okay.
Right beside each other, just like we perform. And I'd never recorded that way. And it was hard. It was frustrating at times. Like, if you just let me put this stupid guitar down, I can sing this better.
Yeah.
And Charlie was adamant. He's like, maybe, technically, but he said, you sing differently when you don't have a guitar in your hands. And it's not as compelling. And it's not as compelling as when you both are singing at the same time as well. And so, like, if I missed a note, the take was bad.
Right.
If I missed a guitar note, the take was bad. You couldn't keep anything.
Yeah.
So it was a little like, the old school back in the Jim Reeves, Patsy Cline days.
For sure.
Like, you didn't get it. But Charlie was really good at full take comping.
Yeah.
So luckily, my years of being here in the Shoals, my timing was
solid.
Whether it was good or not, it was consistent.
Yeah.
So if I played a song a certain tempo, I would play it over and over the same tempo.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I could do that until doing that record. But he said, we can comp that verse from the first tape onto this 7th tape. And so that helped you loosen up. So when you play the song, you miss a note, keep going. And eventually Charlie would say, okay, I got everything I need. And he'd use most of one take, but there'd be bits and pieces that are like, oh, this bridge was magic. We need to. And it felt like everybody does it now. But at the time, it was a little bit novel. And he had done it back in his jazz days on tape and had gotten really good at how to do full band comps. And we do it a ton over here. Ben Tanner's great at it.
I bet. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your situation now? So you're in Florence or you're in Muscle Shoals?
Florence.
No,
nobody's actually in Muscle Shoals.
Really?
We all say we're from Muscle Shoals, but I mean, Ben graduated from Muscle Shoals High School, but everyone else is from somewhere else, or they're from Green Hill, or they're from Waterloo, or they're from Colbert County, and but we're all from Muscle Shoals. Jason Isbell says he's from the Shoals. He's from Green Hill, which is up closer to Loretto, where I grew up. But we all get it. We all cut our teeth here.
So there's like a serious history there with recording, obviously. How much of that were you aware of, like, as a kid? Like, was it a thing that was around, or were you oblivious?
Oblivious.
Okay.
Again, I could have been a million miles from Muscle Shoals too.
Yeah.
On a farm out there, I knew this is something that I get on a soapbox about it sometimes, but like when you were growing up, and I think we're probably roughly the same age.
I think we're exactly the same age.
So, when we were growing up, and it's not that long ago, but there's no internet, there's no satellite radio, there's no cell phones, there's no nothing. All I knew was the records my parents had, the records my friends' parents had, and whatever was being played on the radio. And radio up there was top 40 pop and top 40 country.
Okay. Yeah.
Unless you listen to NPR and listen to classical stuff. That was it. That was your education. You knew nothing else. Once I started playing music, going and seeing bands play, then I started all the soul and R&B and everything that this place is known for. I took it all in. But growing up, I only knew Don Williams and Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash, but also my mom's Johnny Mathis, Dino, Frank Sinatra, things like that, which I think is what made me who I am. My kids have access to every song ever recorded for $10 a month. And so there's nothing regional about their tastes.
Right.
Because they listen to everything.
Yeah.
They're not, and I think that's going to be the death of regional music. Because
that's kind of too bad, because that was a real thing that was real in those days where you just grew up around something.
I think, and I've always said this, I really don't want to be too good a guitar player, because I think I do better painting with primary colors, and I get everything possible out of that simple palette. If I was a great player, it'd be infinite. If I was a great keyboard player with all the sounds and different things you can do, it'd be infinite. And I don't think I'd be able to create that way. And so when you've only got a few tools that you grew up with, and you're just the best at those few
Maximize
things.
them. Yeah.
I think it's so much better than being good at lots of things. And so
that's sort of
we'll see.
That's sort of an interesting thing about Muscle Shoals too, is like those guys were like so specific at what they did, but they just did it. They did that thing so well, like the players and guys like Rick Hall that were sort of the orchestrators of that whole thing too. Did you ever meet any of those? Like, did you meet Rick Hall ever?
Oh yeah.
You did?
Yeah. We were friends.
Oh, you were? Oh man.
Yeah. I never worked for him.
Yeah.
So I had nothing but good relationship with him. I heard everybody else's horror stories of working in the studio with him. But he was always sweet to me. And anytime I was over there, John, how you doing? Play me your new stuff. And you're welcome here anytime. He was great.
Did you guys ever record at Fame or Muscle Shoals Sound?
Yes. And not at Muscle Shoals Sound, but at Fame. Wrote a few songs there too. Yeah. My Father's Father was written there the day of Obama's inauguration.
Yeah.
It was all kind of born out of that. That place is an important place to me. Along Goodbye was recorded there. Parts of Beulah was recorded there, and parts of the Hurt and Kind.
Oh, okay. So you did a bunch of stuff there.
Yeah. A lot of demos too. Over the years. That's how I met Ben Tanner. He was an apprentice over there, and we clicked really quickly.
Yeah.
And so I owe them a lot. Rodney, his son, they've always been very accommodating, very sweet. Linda, his wife, is one of my favorite humans on earth. But outside of that, to give a little bit of a backstory on the Shoals' influence on me, as soon as I started playing music, I started coming in contact with Spooner Oldham and Jimmy Johnson and Roger and David Hood especially.
Yep.
And every one of them to a person was just like, man, really like what you're doing. I'd love to help you out. And like, hey, we're doing this show over here. Do you want to come play with us, or do you want to sing a song or what?
So cool.
And I'm like, again, like with Rick, like, you know who you are? I mean, you play the bass line on I'll Take You There. Why are you even talking to me? But every one of them, the first time I met Jimmy Johnson, a friend of a friend introduced me and took me to Muscle Shoals Sound when it was down by the river, the big naval reserve that they appropriated. And I was nobody from nowhere. I'd never done anything but play in VFWs and American Legions. And Jimmy talked to me for almost 3 hours. About just stories about Joe Cocker and Paul Simon and Rod Stewart, and because he figured out really quickly that I knew the R&B background, but I really knew Bob Dylan and Bob Seger and Dr. Hook and Leon Russell and all that. So he just regaled me all day like I was somebody. And I thought, man, and every single one of those guys, that's how they carry themselves. And I think that's why this place is special.
Yeah.
They also play that way because, they have certain styles of playing, but if you listen to Muscle Shoals records, especially after the first 4 or 5 years when the Swampers were really, you listen to the stuff done at the Muscle Shoals Sound studio. It's very eclectic, and they're truly playing what's best for that band, that artist at that time on that song. It's not like Motown or Stax, like we have a sound and you came here for that sound, so we'll give it to you. Nah, it's not like that at all. So you listen to Kodachrome, and then you listen to Take a Letter Maria, or you listen to anything on Carney, you wouldn't know they're from the same area.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love being part of the community that it's not about us. It's about whatever serves the song. And I think that's why it's still vibrant and why it still matters.
It's also really interesting that a lot of those, or most of those guys, like never left too, right? Like it's when you think about the insane discography that they had, and that they could have probably had careers in LA or New York or Nashville or whatever, but most of them just stuck around and kept working there. It's pretty cool, pretty unique.
Roger and David every once in a while would go out on a tour with like Traffic, or
the Water Boys or whatever. Yeah.
Water Boys, but ultimately they always would rather be home. They were super happy to just be in studio musicians, and they go to LA and Memphis and New York and do sessions, but none of them ever left. Never felt like they had to. Yeah.
So the studio that you've got now, do you sort of co-own it with Ben Tanner? Is that is it your place, or what is it? It's my place, and the majority of the gear is mine, but we're definitely partners. I mean, he's the brains over there. I don't know how to run most of that stuff. Okay, I could figure it out if you gave me enough time, but when it comes to routing and patching and all that, I'm like, that's you, man. Yeah. You take it. And when it comes to mixing, I have no urge to mix. Okay. I never spent time fine tuning EQ or things like that. And I'm fascinated with it, but it ain't my world. And he loves it. If you're producing, do you sit there and are you involved in the process, or do you just leave it to Ben or to whoever's mixing the record?
The technical side I leave to him. Except, hey, I want it to sound like this. Can we? And I've done it enough to know, hey, let's get that champ out and run it through that Echoplex with this 12-string electric. I know how to do all that. But what mic to use, I don't know. I don't care. Just put a 57 on it. I don't care. Yeah. Ben cares, and Ben knows better. So it's a really good partnership because his brain works a little different than mine. I'm usually way more in tune with, is the song being served?
Right. That's a good combination, having somebody like that.
And the vocal. Team. My favorite thing is producing the vocal. It's my favorite thing of all. It's like giving little tricks and tips of how to get the breath in where people don't notice it, but everything still stay emotional and conversational. I feel like that's probably my strength. In those situations, but everything I've produced has been with Ben, and I don't see that changing.
Is it a commercial space, or is it on your property?
I live, I'm here on Poplar Street. I can see the studio, which is the house next door. Yeah. Oh, great. So this is old, late 1800s, old Victorian, and it's also same era stone house.
Cool.
That when it became for sale, I really could not afford it, but I couldn't afford not to.
Right.
Because year.They's buying up everything, so it would have been a frat house or something if I hadn't done it.
So did you come in and do a bunch of work on it, or did you just kind of like move stuff in and just use what was there?
Yeah.
Cool.
That was almost that was on purpose. Not because of lack of funds. I didn't want a typical studio vibe. I wanted it to feel like you were in somebody's living room, somebody's bedroom, and that you literally are. Yeah. I tore out. There was 2 rooms, and I tore a doorway out so you could to connect them. But other than that, nothing. We for acoustics, at least at first, we've got some bass traps and stuff now. But my kids' school, they were going to get rid of their curtains. Curtains were from back in the 80s. They were the typical red theater curtains, super heavy, chains in the bottom of them to weight them down and everything. And I said, I tell you what, I'll help y'all buy some new curtains if I could have your old ones. And as soon as we hung them up in the control room, it was just instant, like, this room will work. Yeah. We can mix in this room. And, there's things about it that could be better and that we're tweaking, but Ben knows that room inside and out. So when he mixes something, he knows what he's hearing.
Totally.
He knows where the low end is a little too hopped in that room, and he can compensate for it, things like that. So,
sounds like a great little operation.
I'm, as I said, I'm a very lucky guy. I worked really hard to be able to make this happen, but man, I know lots of people more talented than me that have not gotten, are not where I am. And I don't take it for granted at all.
So going forward from here, you put out a record in 2019. The COVID thing has been crazy, and you're teaching now. Do you foresee, is it in the works for you to make a record in the next while, or are you just going to wait till that inspiration hits to feel like you're writing the material again? Or
I'm not going to wait. Mm-hmm. And that record will depend on whether I think those songs are great and compelling and something I need to say. I don't know what it'll sound like at all, and I never do, and that's fine with me. I don't. When I sit down and I start playing after I've written 10, 20 songs, I'll know what the record's supposed to sound like, and that's exciting. But I feel like I have another record in me. I may have 10 more records in me, but
you do.
The next one is the one I got to focus on.
Yeah,
and it be a good, healthy spot, and not be doing it for any reason other than I want to, and that I want to connect with people. So as long as that's the criteria, I trust whatever happens.
Yeah, it felt like with the Hurting Kind, it was sort of like you had a concept in mind or something that I don't know if you really were writing the material towards that project or not, but
yes and no. I was listening to a ton of that Bill Putnam engineered, the Chet Atkins stuff.
Yep.
I love the Countrypolitan thing. I never understood people that didn't like it.
You killed it on that record, man. It doesn't sound like a throwback, but it sounds like very inspired by, and it's great.
Well, then we did our job. I did not want to make a retro record. I didn't want a bunch of RCA ribbon mics to make me sound like a Jim Reeves or anything like that. I wanted it to be a modern record. Yeah. But with those sensibilities and not be afraid of being slick, for lack of a better term. I wanted it to be slick. I wanted the players to be really fucking good at what they do. And I got Pat Bergeson, who
that guy's not bad, eh?
Well, and John Estes. Do you know John Estes?
I do.
Bass player.
Yeah.
He's a producer in his own right as well.
Yeah.
He's the one that introduced me to Pat, because I told him, I said, who I want for this session is Chet Atkins. I can't think of anyone that is. He was like, I got the guy.
Yeah.
And he was as advertised. He's
insane.
He's unbelievable. Did
you hear him play harmonica?
I didn't allow him to.
He's a better harmonica player than he is a guitar player. Let me just tell you that.
That's what he said. But I hate harmonica. I mean, I instantly am mad when a harmonica enters a song.
Okay, then.
Saxophone's close.
Yeah.
Harmonica's number one. And it's years of listening to Bob Dylan. Because not only did it not sound like he knew how to play it, but it sounded like he was doing it just to make it interesting. And it was at the same volume. It was at the mic volume didn't change. So it would just rip my ears out.
Fucking head off, yeah.
Just have to turn it down. Oh, Bob's back singing now. I can listen again. Like, no, man, I ain't doing it. It was so harsh, and there's times when I can appreciate it, but he got a kick out of it. He was like, "Well, the way I play harmonica, I'll do it through an amp, and you want." Like, no, man,
it's not going to happen.
Play guitar. And he loved that. He thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they can convince me. Like, oh, you ain't heard me play harmonica. All right, go ahead. Nah, still a harmonica, man. Still hate it.
Yeah.
But Pat, John Estes, had string section, and I bought a vibraphone for the occasion. Wicked. It was Hank Snow's old vibraphone.
Really?
I got an album cover over there sitting next to it, and it's Hank. He had done an instrumental record that I did not know existed. Oh, and he's standing there in front of that vibraphone with a bunch of other instruments. in a semicircle, you know.
Amazing.
It's got little tabs on it with what note each one is.
Oh.
And I mean, you can see them in that album cover. You can see it. So it's like, I got to think Hank put those on there. But regardless, it's a great sounding instrument. And I kept noticing when I'd listen to those old records, they'd usually be acoustic guitar, upright bass,
yeah,
maybe a snare,
yeah,
and vibraphone.
A lot of the time you think there's drums and there's just not drums.
Yeah. It's just the chop, or it's the plug. And I never recorded anything that simply, but the vibraphone, it's one of those things over here that's like, I've never put it on a track and said, nah, it ain't working. It just
I love it too, man.
Works.
Yeah.
I love it. So that's how that, but I was listening to lots of Roy and all that stuff. And
did you do that record in Nashville or did you do it at your place?
All of my stuff's been here at my place. They came down. Like, I just knew that I was looking for that kind of music in a modern setting, and no one was doing it. No one other than maybe Rufus Wainwright was doing the whole rose in your teeth, dramatic, look at me kind of vocal. You know, everything is always shoegaze and simplified, and if it's rangy, it's, you know, you're trying too hard or whatever. And I was like, no, man, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to, you know, Roy Orbison would, you know, all of my heroes would, Patsy would. So I'm going to go for it. And I did, and I scratched that itch, and I'm really proud of that record. Yeah. But I don't know that I'll do another record with a, you know, preconceived notion of what it should be. But I'm very proud of that record.
Well, taking up enough of your time, I think. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you cook up next, and I'm sure a little time away from writing is probably going to stir up some crazy new stuff in your brain. So I'm looking forward to hearing what comes next, man.
I hope you are right. I would be remiss if I didn't ask about your gear back here. What console are you working on? Is that an API?
Yeah, it's a 1608.
Yeah, I wanted one. Is it an earlier story? Like, my wife was teaching full time, and I was on the road, and 3 kids, and she'd call me crying, you know, from just the stress of it all. And I'm in LA, in some, you know, beautiful place with great weather, and she's here in this drafty ass old Victorian. And finally told her, you have to quit your job. You have to. I have no idea how we're going to pay our bills.
Yeah,
we can't keep going like this. And it worked out. Things started doing like this for the Civil Wars, and we were able to fully renovate our house the way we wanted to. And so yeah, you gotta follow your gut. But you got it. The thing I wanted was the endless manipulation of those 500 units, and you know that the console could be it could almost be a completely different console, you know, every year, depending on this session. We should use these sorts of components. That's fun, man. That's exciting.
Yeah, I swap them around quite a bit, and there's like 16. You know, I've got all the EQs here, but then there's 8 more that you know. I've got like a spring reverb set up, and then a few different weird preamps that are good for things, and some compressors and stuff. And you can just kind of do whatever, and it's pretty great. For all that stuff.
I think the one thing that held me back, and this may not be it, but I think Ben's reservation was how the routing was. And is it an inline console?
No.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that can be problematic. But for me, it's like, I don't know, it just works so well. There's issues where I wish they'd done something differently or whatever, but it is what it is, and it's what I have, and I love the way it sounds, and it's cool because it's got the automation on it too, which is another thing that was like, I would never have afforded that, but it was just like, it came with the thing. It was already in there, and you know.
Was it Massenburg automation?
No, it's their own API thing. It's like this funny little computer right on the thing, and it actually works really well.
I wanted it for all the things that you're saying. I already had a Studer 962. broadcast desk, and it's great. Sounds great. Lots of headroom. Doesn't color the sound that much, so you have control of. But again, routing and things like that. So we just got a new, not a new, but an old Neotech.
Oh, cool.
And
where'd you find that?
Very happy. Nashville.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. Yeah, Nashville. And it's in good condition, and it sounds fantastic, but it also has given Ben a whole lot more flexibility on how he does his job. And it felt like we had gotten to a point where we needed to do that. Plus, it looks like a real console.
Yeah, that helps too. Yeah.
When people come in and like, oh, okay, this is a real studio.
How big is the console?
It's not that big, probably 6 foot long.
Is it like 24 track or something?
Yeah,
cool.
We swore we were never going to have anything more than 16.
Yeah, that's the thing for me is like I rarely go above 16. If I do, there's ways
we rarely do.
Yeah,
we rarely do. I remember when we first started talking, we were talking about consoles and everything, and I was shopping around trying to find something to fit in my budget. But I asked him, I said, so do we need more than 16 channels? He said, God, I hope not. Like, you're my man.
Yeah, that's how you know.
So we just got a 2-inch 16 track.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're still
like an MCI or something, or a Studer, or what'd you get?
I'm drawing a blank now that you ask. ATR?
Well, they make tape, but maybe.
No, it's not. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
Well, that's all right.
I'm just drawing a complete blank. I can see it through the window.
You can literally see it.
You can literally see it. It came out of Vancouver. It was the one. It was used for Heart, Crazy on You, Barracuda.
Oh, okay.
Stuff.
Probably from Little Mountain. Then I'm from Vancouver, so I know that studio really well.
Awesome. That's what they told us. So
okay.
It may be a thing where every recorder that comes out of Vancouver, they just add that to it. And honestly, I don't care. I don't need to know. I'm just going to keep going with that story.
That's right.
But it sounds great. It's got some bugs. We got to.
They all do.
So we record mostly digital. We work with a lot of really quiet artists and tape. I don't have to explain it to you. Yeah. As much as I want to, I want to make a big rock record. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily for me. I'd love to produce just a balls to the wall, super out. Loud. Yeah. And tape. That's where it found that band yet.
That's where it really shines, I think, and it's still worth doing. Maybe. Yeah. If
you hear of a rock band that wants to come make a record down shows, you just let me know.
All right. I got to get down there, man. I feel like an idiot for never having been to Muscle Shoals. Like, considering how much of a fan I am of all the music that's made there, and
there's
I live so close.
So many people up there that have never been down here.
Yeah, I've been here for 10 years now, and it's like I got to come down and check that town out.
Well, please let me know if you do, and I'll give you the tour. I'll take you over to Fame and Muscle Shoals Sound, and
oh man, that'd be amazing.
You can come see my place, and you can go see Helen Keller's birthplace if you want to do that.
Really? Wow. Okay. Cool, man. Well, thanks so much, John Paul. I appreciate the time,
pleasure.
Man, and it's great to talk to you. And thanks
man.
Thanks for scheduling it with me. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, everybody. Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast is produced at the Hen House Studio in East Nashville, Tennessee. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find more info on this episode, including show notes and an audio playlist for Spotify and Apple Music at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Thank you again to our sponsors this season, Union Tube and Transistor, Spectra 1964, the Deering Banjo Company, Mule Resonator Guitars, and the Hen House Hang. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another chilling episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. Over and out.